So I was talking in the last lecture about so many of the implications of the Treaty of Versailles that I'm just kind of throwing it out there that this is such a significant um, treaty conference in terms of just like ripple effects and unexpected and unintended consequences. So one of the other things is Western society, even after World War One, and that I want to talk about. So World War One, Treaty of Versailles, all these things are going to have their after effect. So one is the rise of relativism and cynicism. So what's relativism? Relativism is when you just stop believing in values like there being actual right or wrong. But like the lines are so blurred that you become just like, what is your good, or like, this is a way that a lot of people look at, like, let's say liberals now, like people who, sexuality is relative. How old should someone be to drink, or blah blah blah. There's not like a set way for ethics and morality to be. And then there's just the cynicism. And the cynicism is when you're just so cynical and fed up. You're not even playing that game. You're just kind of like, you know, one side murders the other side, so all political isms are just whatever, and there's no real value in anything, and you just kind of like, ugh. So Surrealist art actually comes out of a poetry movement. And the Surrealists were, I would say, quite cynical, or are taken aback by what they saw in World War One. Many were veterans of the war, whether they were doctors or simply just watched their own country become devastated. And you had like Antonin Artaud here. He says all writing is garbage. There was this really just kind of like iconoclastic, like just, pardon the expression, fuck everything kind of mentality coming out of a lot of the Surrealist movement. Basically saying, oh, civilization, Western civilization, so noble, so beautiful that it actually produced, 60,000 dead in one day on the battlefield, and like, trench warfare. And so then you have Andre Breton. He's actually the founder of the Surrealist movement, and he was a writer actually. So again, if those of you who are familiar with art, Surrealism actually originates with a literary movement. Andre Breton is one of them. And he says, in matters of revolt, none of us should need ancestors. So this is the arch anti-conservative, right? To say everything from the past is just bullshit, and we're not going to get anywhere going to the past. And then in science, you had, belief science, you had Freudian psychoanalysis. So Freud basically said that the unconscious is superior to the consciousness. And you had Einstein talking about the theory of relativity. And whether or not these things should apply to social situations or views about society in the way that many thinkers make them out to, they did affect the way that people were thinking about the world. And then there was a changing role of women. I mean, gosh, that's, all I get. And I guess here's what we're talking about, is that society didn't believe in itself, in Western society, in the way it did before, perhaps. And maybe it's never recovered. One professor actually argued that beatniks, hippie, gangster rap, all of this stuff really couldn't have come out of the West except for the cynicism and the relativism that comes after World War One. He can't prove that, and I don't want to try to promote that too much, but there is a suspicion, there is legitimately, that the Western world, we're talking about Europe and America, really lost itself after World War One in a way that different from before. And so here, look at Salvador Dali's soft construction with boiled beans. What the hell is that? Premonition of Civil War, 1936. He was Spanish, talking about the Spanish Civil War. We'll be going into more details on that. And here again, like this kind of like these titles. Surrealists believed in using Freud for art to say that the unconscious is more superior than the conscious. And after all, what did consciousness produce but war and destruction and death, right? Um, and then we had, again, the changing role of women. This, mini skirts, seeing legs. We always think about the Islamic world being associated with covering up women. But, in fact, women having mini skirts was considered a big deal. The role of women in the world has been relatively consistent, in my opinion, in terms of the way that men have treated women and views about clothes and modesty and gender expectations and so on. But anyways, so we'll move on from there and just talk about also technology and popular culture. This also changed things a lot. The Jazz Singer, 1927, was the end of the silent film era. Jazz Singer is its complicated. There's a lot of commentary I can make on this film, and if you're interested in it, and there's a lot of thought. It's about a Jewish man who plays blackface. Gosh, we can just keep talking about, like, so many people have written on the Jazz Singer, different thoughts about its political meaning and its social and cultural context. But just to say, big impact on the world of culture, right? To have actually the end of silent film. And then the radio brought in to households to transmit messages and ideas. So technology and disseminating information and all of that really changed. And then the popular use of the automobile. I mean, look at here on the beach, right? So these are also significant aspects that are happening in the interwar years. So I'm going to end this section here, and we'll move on to the next one.